For 15 years, my world was a small, perfect universe of two. His name was Mark, and he was the sun I orbited. My life wasn't defined by grand adventures or a high-flying career. It was defined by him, by his dream, and my unwavering dedication to it. We met in college. He was the charismatic business major with visions of grandeur, and I was the quiet art history student who was more comfortable in a library than a boardroom. But I fell for that fire in his eyes. When he told me he wanted to start his own custom furniture business, I didn't just support him. I became the foundation he built his empire on. I dropped my master's program, telling everyone it was because I'd found my true calling. And in a way, I had. My calling was Mark. Our first workshop was a dusty, two-car garage. I was the one who was there at 5 a.m., brewing the coffee that smelled of sawdust and ambition. I was the one who learned bookkeeping from a community college night class, so we wouldn't have to hire an accountant. My hands, which once delicately handled ancient textbooks, became calloused from sanding wood, staining surfaces, and packing shipments until my back ached in a way that I told myself was satisfying. I was the chief financial officer, the head of shipping, the human resources department, and the janitor, all rolled into one. I didn't take a salary for the first 5 years. Everything went back into the company. Our dream. I loved it. I loved the shared struggle, the late-night pizza on top of stacks of invoices, the way he'd pull me close and whisper, "We're going to make it, you and me." My identity was so deeply woven into his that I couldn't see where I ended and he began. I was Mrs. Davenport, co-founder of Davenport Designs, the silent partner, the woman behind the man. And I wore that title with more pride than any academic degree. The day it all shattered started like any other Tuesday. Hectic. Mark was buzzing around our large, beautiful home. The home I had managed the contractors for, the home I had chosen the paint colors for, the home paid for by years of my unpaid labor. He was late for a meeting, knotting his tie with a frantic energy. "Honey, I need you to do something for me," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. He tossed a thick manila folder onto the polished granite of our kitchen island. It landed with a heavy thud. "Just some papers for the company. Standard end-of-quarter stuff. I've already signed my parts. Just need your signature on the highlighted tabs." I picked it up. It was heavy, dense, with legalese I didn't understand. I felt a tiny, stupid flicker of unease. "What is it exactly?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He sighed, a gust of theatrical impatience. "Babe, it's just corporate restructuring. We're moving some assets around for tax purposes. You know, boring stuff. Our lawyer, Mr. Gable, drew it all up. It's all above board." He came around the island, kissed my forehead. His lips felt cold. "I trust you, don't I? We're a team." His words were the magic spell that always worked. We're a team. Of course we were. My doubt felt like a betrayal of him, of us. I opened the folder, found the yellow sticky tabs marked "Sign here," and I signed. I signed my name, my full legal name, over and over on pages I didn't read, my hand moving automatically while he checked his watch. He gave me a quick, triumphant peck on the cheek, grabbed his briefcase, and was out the door. "I'll be late tonight." "Don't wait up," he called over his shoulder. I remember standing there in the silent kitchen, the smell of his expensive cologne hanging in the air, my hand still holding the pen. The rest of the day was normal. I processed payroll, dealt with a disgruntled client, scheduled deliveries. It wasn't until around 4 p.m. that the phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. "May I speak with Mrs. Davenport?" a voice asked. It was a man, and he sounded strained, like he was holding back tears. "This is she," I said, a knot beginning to form in my stomach. This is Jonathan Gable. I was your husband's attorney." The past tense hit me first. Was. "Is everything okay, Mr. Gable?" I asked, my voice small. There was a choked sob on the other end of the line. A sob. From a lawyer. "Mrs. Davenport. I can't, oh God. I'm so sorry." I didn't know what he was doing until it was all filed this morning. "He told me you were both in agreement." My blood ran cold. In agreement about what? I whispered, my knuckles white as I gripped the phone. He took a shaky breath. "The papers you signed this morning, they weren't for corporate restructuring. One was a power of attorney granting him sole control over all shared assets. Another was a quitclaim deed, signing the house over to a holding company he owns. The rest effectively signed over your half of the business, your stock options, everything for the sum of $1. The world tilted. The words didn't make sense. It was like he was speaking a foreign language. What are you saying? I asked, but I knew. I knew. He's cleaned you out, Mrs. Davenport. The lawyer finally wept, his professional composure completely gone. He's dissolved your financial partnership. He's sold the company to a competitor. The deal closed an hour ago. The money was wired to an offshore account that's solely in his name. The house, the business, your savings, it's all gone. He left you with nothing. I'm so sorry. I should have called you. I am obligated to, and I will be reporting my own conduct, but I had to tell you myself. I don't remember hanging up. I remember the phone slipping from my numb fingers and clattering to the floor. The sun was streaming through the kitchen window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, and it felt like I was watching a scene from someone else's life. He didn't just leave me. He had erased me. 15 years of my life, my work, my love, all sold for $1. At that moment, my floor disappeared. It was the deepest pain I had ever felt. If you've ever gone through a great disappointment and understand what it's like to have your heart broken, please like this video so I know I'm not alone on this journey. The days that followed are a blur of gray, a thick, suffocating fog of shock and grief. The first night, I waited up for him, a part of me convinced it was all a horrible, elaborate misunderstanding. He never came home. The next morning, a different lawyer, a man with cold eyes and an expensive suit, showed up at my door with an eviction notice. I had 72 hours to vacate the property. My home. It wasn't mine anymore. My credit cards were declined. Our joint bank account was empty. My name was no longer on the company letterhead. It was as if I had simply ceased to exist. I called his number, it was disconnected. I called his friends, our friends, and was met with a wall of awkward silence or mumbled excuses. They had chosen their side. I packed a single suitcase, wandering through the rooms like a ghost, touching the furniture I had helped design and build. Each object was a memory, a testament to a life that had been a lie. I slept on the couch of my one friend who hadn't abandoned me, a woman from my old art history program. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, the lawyer's crying voice echoing in my head. I felt a shame so profound it was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I was a fool. A trusting, naive fool who had poured her entire existence into a man who saw her as nothing more than a line item to be deleted. The world I had helped build had no place for me in it. I was 38 years old, with a 15-year gap on my resume, no money, no home, and a heart that felt like it had been scooped out with a spoon. I tried to find a job, but what was I qualified for? Homemaker? Support system? My confidence was shattered. I took a job washing dishes in a small diner. My hands, once familiar with spreadsheets and wood varnish, now perpetually chapped and smelling of grease. It was humbling, soul-crushing work. Each plate I scrubbed felt like a penance for my stupidity. One rainy Saturday, my friend gently told me the last of my boxes from the old house had been delivered and were taking up all the space in her small storage locker. I had to go through them. The thought of sorting through the wreckage of my former life made me nauseous, but I knew I couldn't put it off forever. The storage unit was cold and smelled of damp concrete. I sliced open the box labeled Attic, Sentimental. Inside were old photo albums and college mementos. And underneath it all, a small, cedar chest. I didn't remember packing it. I pried it open. The scent that wafted out was a ghost from a different lifetime. Lavender, rosemary, and chamomile. It was my grandmother's chest. She had passed away when I was in my first year of college, right before I met Mark. She was a woman who seemed to have magic in her fingertips. She lived in the countryside and had a sprawling garden. People in her small town called her a healer. She made soaps that could soothe the most irritated skin, salves that healed burns, and teas that could calm any anxiety. Inside the chest was her journal. It was a thick, leather-bound book, its pages filled with her elegant, looping handwriting. It wasn't just recipes. It was her life. Stories about foraging for herbs in the moonlight, notes on the properties of different oils, sketches of plants and flowers. I ran my fingers over the brittle pages. I remembered the feeling of her handmade soap in my hands as a child, the clean, natural scent, so different from the harsh chemical detergents at the diner. I remembered her telling me, "Nature provides everything we need to heal, inside and out. You just have to know how to listen." I sat there on the cold concrete floor, surrounded by the ghosts of a life that was gone, and I clutched that book to my chest. It felt like an anchor. It was a piece of my history, a part of me that had nothing to do with Mark. It was a legacy passed from one woman to another. In the deepest, darkest pit of my despair, holding that book, a tiny, fragile thought flickered to life. It wasn't a plan. It wasn't even hope, not yet. It was just a question. I wonder if I could still make her soap? That small question became my lifeline. I spent every spare moment I had, not sleeping, but reading my grandmother's journal. I took the few dollars I made from the diner and didn't spend them on better food or small comforts. I spent them at the health food store, buying little bottles of essential oils, blocks of shea butter, and dried herbs. My friend's tiny apartment kitchen became my laboratory. My first batch of lavender soap was a disaster. A gloopy, separated mess. The second was better, but ugly. I failed over and over. I got chemical burns on my hands from mishandling lye. I filled the apartment with strange, sometimes unpleasant, smells. But I didn't stop. For the first time in months, I felt a spark of something other than pain. I felt focused. I was learning a language my grandmother had spoken, a language of patience, chemistry, and nature. I was creating something with my own two hands, something that wasn't for Mark or for a company, but for me. After weeks of trial and error, I made a perfect batch. A simple oatmeal and chamomile soap, designed for sensitive skin. It smelled of the earth and of comfort. I cut a bar and used it. It felt like I was washing away more than just the grime of the diner. I felt like I was washing away the shame, the invisibility. I was reconnecting with a part of myself I had forgotten existed. I started small. I used my meager savings to buy enough supplies for a few dozen bars. I got a spot at a local farmer's market, setting up a rickety card table between a woman selling artisanal jams and a man selling organic kale. My little display of handmade soaps looked humble, almost pathetic. People would walk by, glance over, and keep going. My heart sank with each person who passed. I felt that old wave of invisibility wash over me. Was this another foolish dream? But then a young woman with a baby stopped. She looked exhausted. She pointed to my chamomile soap. "Is this really all natural? My son has terrible eczema, and the doctor's creams are so harsh." I found my voice. I told her about my grandmother, about the ingredients, about the gentle properties of the chamomile I had ground by hand. I wasn't selling, I was sharing. I saw a flicker of trust in her eyes. "I'll take one," she said. It was my first sale. $10. It felt more valuable than any of the thousands that had passed through my hands at Davenport Designs. The next Saturday, she was back. She rushed up to my table, her eyes shining. "I don't know what's in this," she said, holding up the half-used bar of soap, "but it's magic. His skin hasn't been this clear in months. He's not scratching all night. I can't thank you enough." She bought 4 more bars. But more than that, she gave me a gift far greater than money. She gave me back my purpose. I wasn't just the woman Mark left behind. I was the woman who had helped a mother soothe her child. That feeling was intoxicating. It was real. That one customer became my turning point. She told her friends, her mother's group. The next week, I sold out. The week after, I had to double my production. People started coming to the market looking specifically for the soap lady. They didn't just buy my products. They told me their stories. Stories of skin conditions, of stress, of needing a small moment of peace in their day. I listened. I started creating new products based on their needs, using my grandmother's journal as my guide. A peppermint foot soak for a nurse who was on her feet all day. A calendula salve for a gardener with rough hands. A calming lavender linen spray for a student stressed about exams. I named my little business Hearth and Root, a name that felt grounded, real. I built a simple website. Orders started trickling in, then flowing. I quit my job at the diner. I moved out of my friend's apartment and into a small place of my own, with a spare room that became my dedicated workshop. The scent of herbs and essential oils was the first thing I smelled in the morning and the last thing I smelled at night. It was the scent of my new life. It was there, with my own hands, that I began to rewrite my story. I stopped being the victim and became the author of my destiny. If my journey of overcoming is inspiring you, subscribe to the channel to follow the next chapters and be part of this community of new beginnings. 2 years passed. 2 years of grueling work, of 18-hour days, of plowing every dollar I made back into hearth and root. It was a different kind of work from my old life. This work nourished me. It built me up instead of draining me. My little market stall grew into a beautiful shop in a quaint part of town. I had 2 employees. My products were being carried in small boutiques across the state. I wasn't wealthy, not in the way I had been with Mark, but I was rich in ways I'd never known. I had a community. I had a purpose. And I had a sense of self that was entirely my own. I rarely thought about Mark anymore. He was a ghost, a character from a book I had read long ago. Until one Thursday afternoon, when the little bell above my shop door chimed, and he walked in. He looked diminished. The expensive suit was still there, but it hung on him differently. There were lines of stress around his eyes that I didn't recognize. He looked around the shop, at the shelves lined with my creations, at the happy customers browsing, and a strange mix of disbelief and calculation crossed his face. My heart didn't pound with fear or sorrow. It was steady. I was standing behind the counter, wrapping a customer's purchase, and I simply watched him. He waited until the customer left, then approached the counter with that old, familiar, charming smile. It didn't reach his eyes. Well, he said, his voice a little too loud for the quiet space. Look at what you've built. I always knew you had it in you. The audacity of it almost made me laugh. What do you want, Mark? I asked. My voice was calm, even. The scared, broken woman he had left behind was gone. In her place stood the owner of Hearth and Root. He leaned against the counter, trying to create an intimacy that no longer existed. I made a mistake, he said, his voice dropping to that conspiratorial whisper he used to use. A huge one. The venture I went into it fell apart. The guy was a con man. I lost most of it. He gestured around the shop. But this is amazing. It's authentic. It's real. Just like you. We were always such a great team. We could take this national. I have the business acumen, you have the talent. We could rebuild everything, bigger and better than before. He was offering me a shadow of our old life, a partnership built on his terms, as if nothing had happened. As if he hadn't forged my signature on my life's work and sold it. As if he hadn't left me homeless and destitute without a second thought. I looked at him, truly looked at him, and I felt nothing but a distant pity. He was a man who only knew how to take, how to use, how to consume. He couldn't build. He could only acquire. No, Mark, I said, and the word felt clean and solid in my mouth. There is no we. You had a company that I poured my life into. I built this. I built it from the ashes you left me in. I built it with my grandmother's memory and my own 2 hands. His face fell. The charm evaporated, replaced by a flash of that old, entitled anger. After everything I gave you? The house, the lifestyle. I held up a hand, stopping him. The things you think you gave me were just decorations in a cage I didn't even realize I was in. Let me tell you what I have now. I have a business that heals people. I have the respect of my community. I have peace. None of which are for sale. He stared at me, speechless. He was looking at a stranger. You should go, I said, my voice soft but unyielding. He opened his mouth to say something else, then closed it. He turned, and without another word, walked out of my shop, the little bell chiming his exit from my life, for good this time. As I watched him go, I felt the last, final thread to my old life snap. I wasn't defined by his betrayal anymore. I was defined by my response to it. My legacy isn't Davenport Designs, a soulless corporation built on a lie. My legacy is in the scent of lavender on a stressed woman's pillow, in the relief of a mother with a child whose skin is finally calm, in the quiet strength I found within myself when I had nothing left. I stand in my shop now, the afternoon sun warming the wooden floors, and I breathe it all in, the rosemary, the eucalyptus, the chamomile. It is the scent of my victory. It is the scent of my peace. I found my way back, not to the life I lost, but to a life that was truly my own, a life rooted in healing, both for my customers and for myself. The greatest cruelty ever done to me became the catalyst for my greatest creation. Today, I understand that the wounds of the past don't define who we are, but what we do with them, yes. I thank you so much for listening to my story this far. If it touched you, share it with someone who needs a light, and leave a comment with a word of strength and hope. Together, we are stronger.